welcome everyone. We're very pleased to have you here both in person and online. Hi. So let me introduce myself real quick. My name is Luis Damian Moreno Garcia. I'm assistant professor here at Hong Kong Baptist University. So this is part of the translation seminar series organized by the Center for Translation and the Academy of Language and Culture, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at Hong Kong Baptist University. And we are very pleased to have with us today our colleague here at the department, Liao Sixin. Professor Liao is assistant professor in the Department of Translation, Interpreting and Intercultural Studies at Hong Kong Baptist University. Her primary research employs eye tracking to investigate how viewers process language in multimodal contexts, such as reading subtitles while watching videos. A second strand of her research explores how subtitles can support the development of reading skills in slow readers and second language users. She is the recipient of the 2025 Assist Prize for the Most Outstanding PhD Thesis and the first laureate of the 2022 CUT PhD Award. So let me introduce the topic of Professor Liao very briefly, and also a bit of housekeeping. So the topic is Beyond Translation, Using Subtitle Videos to Understand Multimodal Language Processing. I'm not going to read the abstract, very probably you have already read it, and Professor Liao will have more time for her presentation. About housekeeping, we will have about 1 hour to 1 hour and a half for Professor Liao's presentation, and then we'll have 30 minutes of Q&A depending on participation. So that is all from me. Please join me in welcoming Professor Liao.
Thank you, Ray, for your kind introduction. And good afternoon to everyone in person here, and good morning, good evening to people online. So thank you for joining us today for this seminar hosted by the Center for Translation at Hong Kong Baptist University. As you may have seen from the poster, although this is a translation seminar, I am actually talking about something beyond translation. So this may sound a little bit confusing to you, so I will first explain what I mean by beyond translation. So in this seminar, I will mainly talk about subtitles and research on subtitling. And I know all of you, most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with subtitles. So subtitles is definitely firmly situated in translation studies as a common mode of audiovisual translation. But what I mean by beyond translation is I will talk about how our research on translated related products like subtitle videos can achieve impacts that extend beyond translation communities and provide some insights into the real world phenomenon that is of high relevance and importance to our daily life. And one phenomenon is multimodal language processing. And you know what multimodal means. So basically it's the combination of different resources, the visual, the text, the audio all together. So we have to present them all simultaneously, which is a really cognitively demanding task, but yet we are all seems to be good at doing that. So my research is really motivated by this kind of curiosity that in knowing actually how people engage in such demanding reading tasks as shown in shown in watching subtitle videos. Before I begin, I would like to express first, acknowledge the contributions of my collaborators and also express my sincere thanks to them. I have been super fortunate to have the opportunity to work with leading experts from different disciplines, in particular my PhD supervisors, Professor Yang Lui Kruger, Professor Eric Reichel, Dr. Lili Yu from Macquarie University, and I also been working on some research into translation, subtitle translation with Professor Li Pan from Guangdong University of Foreign Studies in mainland China. And in recent years, I have been also very lucky, fortunate to have the opportunity to work with Professor Bridge Kafari, who is the founder of Planet, which is a not-for-profit organization in India that is committed to promoting the use of subtitles to advance literacy in India. So we are currently collaborating on some projects that use eye tracking to understand actually how the exposure to subtitles may help children and women in vulnerable communities to develop their reading skills. And our ultimate goal is to translate this kind of research findings into really real world impact that can make a meaningful, that can change the lives of the people to some extent. Okay, here's the outline of today's seminar. So I know you, most of you are familiar with subtitles, but I still want to quickly go through some basics about subtitling, including its evolution, usage times, and key features. The reason is that later when I present the eye tracking evidence on subtitle on the reading or the processing of subtitles, you will realize that this kind of processing is very complicated and can be shaped by a lot of factors associated with the subtitle itself. So the type of the subtitle associated with the audience, individual differences, and associated with the context as well. So that's why I think you may be familiar with the use of subtitle in your daily life, but it's also important and beneficial to have a more comprehensive overview of some basics about subtitling and how that may play a role in shaping people's cognitive processing of the subtitles. And then I would just quickly go through some research topics on subtitling within translation studies and also including the cognitive processing one, because that stream is definitely one with growing momentum in recent years. And I believe you come here mainly because of that, partly because of that. And then I will, the main part will focus on the research trajectory on subtitle processing, dating back to 1980s, where we have the initial eye tracking research on subtitle processing and how it evolved through mid 1990s to now contemporary advances after 2020. I will cover some major research findings in each phase, and then we will conclude with some implications of what we have found for translation studies. And before we go into the seminar, I also want to say that because subtitle processing, the processing of subtitles is definitely a very exciting field. But so I still consider myself as a junior researcher in this field. So what I'm sharing with you is definitely not a definite answer to all research questions. So this field keeps evolving. So please keep an open mind, attitude to all these research questions and even findings. And the only thing I am certain is that I don't know everything, but I hope this seminar provides a platform for further discussions and spark new ideas. Okay, so I know you must be very familiar with subtitles in your daily life because it happens everywhere. You can see it on TikTok and on Netflix and movies, and for different purposes, for entertainment, education, or just global communication. And the first subtitles appear in the early 1990s during the silent film as titles, as you can see on the left side here. So at that time, there's only the silent field. So they would basically insert the text cards between the scenes. And then when it moved to the era of sound films in 1920s, as you can see from the picture on the right side here, So they start to have translated subtitles at the bottom of the screen. So this is arguably, I think, what I can find the first English subtitles for the German film, The Blue Angel. So that is basically some history about how the use of subtitles evolved. Originally, subtitles are designed for deaf and hard of hearing viewers to provide them with the accessibility of the audiovisual content. And nowadays, we definitely seen an expanding usage. So a recent survey has shown that more than 50% of American viewers now use subtitles most of the time. And this number increased to 80 to Gen Zs. Who consistently use subtitles when they watch videos. And in terms of the user groups, we also see diversification. So it's not just limited to deaf and hard of hearings, like those who have hearing impairments, but also include those hearing viewers. So including L1 speakers. So they use subtitles could when they have no or limited access to the audio due to situational constraints like the noisy environment or you're not allowed to use the audio. We also seen a growing number of L2 learners use subtitles to for reading development or for vocabulary acquisition, as you may, from your experience, may see the benefits of using subtitles for vocabulary acquisition and comprehension. In terms of the types of subtitles, there are different categories, different ways to categorize them. And here I broadly put them into two categories. One is monolingual subtitles, so basically subtitles only in one language. So the first is subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing. You can also call it captioning. So it includes not just the dialogue, but also include paralinguistic information such as the sound effects, and also we need to identify the speaker because it's specifically for deaf and hard of hearing. And we will have intralingual subtitles that have the same language as the audio, and interlingual subtitles is basically translated spoken dialogue into another language. And another category is bilingual subtitles, which I found more common in Hong Kong and mainland China compared to, monolingual subtitles are more popular in European context. But now they also tend to have more, bilingual subtitles. And bilingual subtitles basically present subtitles in two different languages. So you can see as a combination of intralingual and interlingual subtitles together. And some key features of subtitles, as you may notice, is first is the temporal constraint. So unlike the static text that we normally read, subtitles will not stay on screen forever. They only stay there for a certain period of time. So that feature is really important because that is the key component in a lot of subtitling guidelines. So if you're doing you have subtitling practice, you will notice you will be required to keep the subtitle speed, right, at certain character per second, etc. So that's because of the importance of this feature. This is the area that has a lot of growing research in recent years, which I will talk about later. And another key feature is the spatial constraint. So you typically we will have subtitles no more than 2 lines, but now because of the advancement of technology, we are now seeing like more creative subtitles. So some can even go to 3 lines, but typically no more than 2 lines, and with no more than 37 characters per line. But because we have bigger screens nowadays, so sometimes some media companies can also allow for maybe 45 or 50 characters per line. But the convention is normally 37. And another key feature is the multimodal nature of subtitles. which means that the subtitle have to be synchronized with the audio and the visual content. And that creates very interesting and also very demanding experience that is multitasking. So you have to read the text at the same time, listen to the audio, and also do the scene perception. So you're doing all these different tasks together at the same time. Although you may feel that you are very adept at doing that, but later I will talk about how each, just take one example, the reading task per se can involve a lot of complicated kind of process. So not to mention when you have to do all this together, actually is quite remarkable achievement, I think. So that is like I think the motivation for my research. When I did my PhD, I just at that time and just kind of motivated by this people's ability to engage in such remarkable multitasking activity. Okay, so subtitle is not a new topic within translation study. Actually, it provides a very rich site for a lot of interesting investigations. Here, I just list some topics, but it's definitely not the comprehensive list. So there are scholars, there are some research that look at how, for example, the subtitles for culture specific reference like idioms and humor are translated in the films, and look at the specific strategies for domestication versus foreignization in subtitle rendering. And subtitle is also a topic that is widely investigated by those who are interested in online collaborated translation. So you all know about the fan subbing. And in more recent years, there is growing research in trying to understanding how the cognitive process underlying the reading of subtitles, of the processing of the subtitles when watching subtitle videos. And this kind of touch on different subtopics. Originally, I think attention distribution is the one that people really interested in, how using eye tracking to look at how people distribute their visual attention amongst different visual resources. And then based on the contextual theory, we start to their research starting to look at how the presentation of subtitle, this kind of multitasking activity will lead to cognitive overload or not. And then, I mean, in more recent years, we start to move to explore the reading process underlying when people watch subtitle videos. So there is a slight distinction here between visual attention distribution and reading process, because sometimes we may think that we are paying attention. For example, if the eye movement, from the eye movement data, you can tell that people are looking at certain areas. You can see their eye movement fixation there. But the question is, does that really mean that they are reading the text, like paying attention to certain visual component, visual resources? Does it means that you are really reading it? So to understand that, we have to get an understanding of what reading process actually encompass. So what kind of stages is involved in reading, and then you can after having an understanding of the core stages of reading, then you can explore whether these kind of stages of reading are manifested in the processing of subtitles based on their eye movement behavior. So by doing that, we move towards to understand multimodal reading in watching subtitle videos. Okay, now moving to the research trajectory on subtitle processing, as we briefly mentioned in the beginning, here is the categorization. I categorize them into three phases. based on a publication, a book chapter that I co-authored with my supervisor, Yang Kruger, I believe in 2003. So at that time, it's part of my PhD thesis. Actually, come out from the literature review of my PhD thesis, providing an overview of the empirical research on content processing of subtitles. The reason behind that is we really know like what has been done, so that we can have a clear plan of the direction that we should move, or have a clear identification of the research gaps that you need to address. So there are, in that publication, we identified there are some slight refinements, of course, but we identified three major phases. The first is the early and foundational research, where we have the initial cognitive studies on subtitle processing with the use of eye tracking. So those are the early eye tracking research on subtitles. And then in the second phase, the expansion and diversification in post-1990s, we see definitely rapidly growing number of empirical studies with more diverse topics. And then we also seeing the integration of theories and models into those empirical research. And then in the contemporary advances in post-2020, that is the time we really start to move to explore multimodal reading in subtitle video. So that is definitely benefit a lot from vibrant interdisciplinary research, and we've seen more methodological innovations and theoretical advancements. We will go through that one by one. But first, some basic, because I talk about all these cognitive processing of subtitles, I will mainly focus on eye tracking. So that's why I think some of you may be familiar with eye tracking, but some are not. So I think it will be beneficial just to provide you with some basics of eye tracking, what that is. So eye tracking, as the name suggests, is a technique that can record your eye movements when people are processing those visual information. So as you can see from the right side here, this is the image of collecting a participant's data in an eye tracking lab when I was back at Macquarie University. So as you can see here, we present the video and you can see vaguely the subtitles below that. So the participants will have his head stabilized on this chin rest, so to minimize his head movements. And then how his eye movement is recorded is through this device, as you can see, which consists of an infrared illuminator that projects the infrared light source and a video camera. So this is the device to capture the eye movement. So the rationale is that the illuminator will project the infrared light source to the eyes, which will provide the corneal reflection back, and then that is captured by the video camera. And based on the corneal reflection and the pupil reflection, the eye movement, the position of the eye movement can be calculated and then overlaid on the stimuli, as you can see here. So this is the stimuli eye movement data exported from I think that's the eye tracking experiment in 2021. So you can see on the eye movement, you can see the blue dots here, which represent the fixation, where they are fixating at. So the size of the circle represents the duration of the fixation. So the longer time they spend on that, the bigger size it will be. And the yellow lines that connect different dots represent the saccades. So those are the rapid eye movements that move between one fixation to another fixation. So fixation and saccades are the basic two basic types of eye movements, but it can lead to a lot of different eye movement measures, which I will talk about later. And based on those eye movement measures, we can analyze. We can for example, analyze their whether they work frequency effect and the wrap-up effect for example, and then to gain insight into whether they actually engage in the lexical processing and post-lexical processing during the reading of subtitles. Okay, so the rationale behind using eye movements to understand the mind is based on the so-called well-known the eye-mind hypothesis proposed by Just and Carpenter in 1980. So what it proposes, what we are looking at, fixating at, is actually closely linked to what we are attending in mind. So especially sometimes you may wonder, like during mind wandering, like when your mind is wandering, what you're looking at is not something that you're processing in mind, right? But in very complicated, complex tasks like reading, if you really need to understand, attain a good comprehension of the task, you won't be able to do that. Like what you're looking at is closely related to what you're attending to mind. That is what happened in processing complicated tasks. So with that basis information of eye tracking, it may make you easier to understand, like the research done by Developed in 1980. So this arguably one of the first early research on using eye tracking to understand the reading of subtitles. As you can see from the screenshot here, is really kind of old paper from a book. So in their experiment, they have a total of 18 participants watch videos with 3 speed or presentation time. 2 seconds, subtitles will be presented on screen for 2 seconds, 4 seconds, and 6 seconds in 3 conditions. The first condition is without sound. So participants have to rely on subtitles. They have to rely on subtitles for comprehension. And they also have 2 sound conditions, and 1 with sound, but participants have limited knowledge of the spoken dialogue. They can't fully understand the spoken dialogue, but can get some information from that. And another is a sound condition is they can fully understand the spoken dialogue. In other words, the subtitle is redundant to them. They don't need to rely on subtitles because they can fully understand spoken dialogue. So what they found is they didn't find any significant difference in terms of the percentage of time spent on subtitles. So percentage of time means the proportion of time spent looking at the subtitles as a function of the subtitles presentation time. So there's no significant difference that was observed between different sound conditions. And based on this finding, the authors conclude that subtitle reading is an automatic reading behavior, regardless of the availability or redundant of the audio. Because even when they don't need to read the subtitle, they don't need it for comprehension, but they still engage, still pay attention to the subtitle. So that's why they conclude subtitle reading is an automatic behavior. And another follow-up study conducted in 1991, they want to test actually 2 hypotheses, why people test the hypothesis behind their conclusion about automatic reading behavior. Because it could be people read subtitles or pay attention to subtitles because of their habits, or you can understand it as sort of top-down attentional control. Because subtitle, there's certain appearance of subtitle, they are there. So you maybe automatically your attention will be drawn to this subtitle. So it's kind of maybe out of habit, but it can also be a top-down attentional control driven by the fact that they may consider subtitle as more efficient. So it provides visual support for them, additional visual support for them to understand the content. So to test this hypothesis, they conducted 2 experiments. In experiment 1, they have American subjects who were not familiar. So basically the familiarity with the subtitles were manipulated. In experiment 1, they have American subjects who were not familiar with subtitles. And experiment 2, they will have Dutch subjects who were familiar with subtitling, and the subtitles and the sound checks were in their native languages. So what they found is, as you can see here, also the time spent on subtitles did not change regardless of the availability of redundant audio. And interestingly, even for those who were not familiar with the subtitle, they still pay like around 22% of time looking at the subtitles. So they kind of provide the supported evidence for the efficiency hypothesis, that is, people read subtitles not because they're habit, but because subtitles are more efficient compared to speech. So that's the foundational and the early and foundational research, eye-tracking research conducted in 1980s. So to sum up, there are the key findings from De Vallis and his colleagues' researches. Subtitle reading is largely automatic and effortless. And second is viewers read subtitles. What that means is viewers read subtitles even they don't need them for comprehension. But the issue, this provides very early and variable insights into the cognitive processing of subtitles, but we have to note that there are some significant methodological limitations in this kind of research. First, they only draw on very coarse eye movement metrics because back at that time, the eye tracker was not that advanced. So the sample range, I think, is only 50 hertz. So that is really low. The accuracy in the eye movement accuracy is not as high as what we have now, and they only look at the eye movement measures they look at is also limited. So coarse eye movement metrics, and as a result, this kind of finding did not provide enough insights into the lexical and post-lexical processing of the subtitles. So there are still many questions. Their research provides some very variable groundwork, but there are many research questions that remain to be answered. The first is how viewers actually engage with word identification, because to engage in reading, you have to identify the words and then combine the meaning of words into sentence and then construct a situational model essential for comprehension. So this a very specific cognitive process are not have not been able to answer at that time. And also it's not at that time what is unknown is how people actually whether the presence of subtitles will compete for visual attentions with other visuals, because they only look at the visual attention on the subtitles, and it's not known whether the processing of subtitles will compromise the processing and comprehension of other visual information, such as the scene perception. So based on this question, when we move to the second phase, we definitely see more research that start to look at diverse factors that can influence the processing of subtitles. So I also broadly put them into broad 3 categories. So one type of factors is specifically associated with subtitles, so including the number of lines. If you remember the key features we quickly went through in the beginning, the subtitle length and subtitle speed are the key features. So that's why it's not that surprising why these factors draw most attention. So there are research looking at the number of lines and also subtitle speed and subtitle segmentation. And there are also some research that look at video specific factors such as the presence and absence of the background video and the short change. But as you can see the summary here, research on video-specific factors is relatively limited compared to research on subtitle-specific factors. But we have to know that actually the video-specific factors can play a significant role in shaping people because that involves the split of attention. Both of them are visual resources, so definitely that which competes for visual attention. So the visual complexity at the background will have an influence on how people engage with the reading of subtitles. But we have conducted some preliminary research on that, and we are still wrapping up the results. But hopefully in the future there could be more research looking at video-specific factors, the influence of video-specific factors on subtitle processing. And there also research looking at how the audio, the availability and the language familiarity of audio may influence the processing of subtitles. And another stream is on the cognitive effect of subtitles. So this stream, the focus of this stream is the concerns about the effective management of cognitive resources when processing audiovisual products, because we know that humans only have limited cognitive resources. So you have to distribute all this when you are exposed to a large amount of information. So whether humans how can they manage all these cognitive resources effectively to attain optimal comprehension, and that is the question they're trying to address in this kind of line of research. We also seen the triangulation, some improvements in research method, the triangulation of eye tracking with self-reported measures such as comprehension tests and the perceived cognitive load questionnaire to measure their perceived efforts, and have the dialogue recognition test, face name association, visual scene recognition. So they're trying to see whether the processing of subtitle and the presence of subtitles, whether that will compromise the processing and comprehension of non-textual information. And we also seen research that start to draw on some theoretical relevant theories to provide a theoretical framework, so to speak. The most widely one of the most widely used is a cognitive load theory and also dual coding theory. There are some relevant research conducted by Empirical, and the colleagues. So if you're interested, you can explore them. So to sum up, advance and limitations in the second phase. So we definitely see some important progress in that field in terms of the in the fact that more diverse topics are explored, and with the use of high precision eye trackers, and also there is they also draw on expanded set of eye tracking measures as well. But still, there is methodological limitation in that we still don't have word level analysis of eye movement data, but there are some. There's one, I forgot the name of that paper, but they indeed look at the eye movement data of some words. So what I'm saying, the lack of word level analysis of eye movement data is the automatic collection of eye movement data on individual words, because to how we export the eye movement data is you have to draw if you can, we can't go back to that far. We have to draw the interest area for so interest area is the area you want to export the eye movement data. So you have to draw that manually. For most eye tracker software, you have to draw them manually. So imagine if you want to draw, typically they only draw the interest area on the subtitle area and the background area, because that is less like involves less manual work. But if you have to have eye movement data on individual words, that means you have to draw interest area on each word manually. And that is really labor intensive. It's not like it's not possible to do that, but it's just very labor intensive. And it also required high precision eye tracker to capture the eye movements on individual words. So these are not feasible at that time. So we don't have comprehensive word level analysis of eye movement data, and as a result, we don't have we have a limited understanding of the lexical and post-lexical processing involved in the reading process. Because to understand the reading process, you have to understand how words are identified and then combined and then constructed to larger units of meanings. So that's why at that time these are not feasible. And also in terms of theoretical development, we still have it's promising that we see the integration of some relevant theories like cognitive load theory, dual coding theory, which are based on some basic principles of cognitive psychology. But still, we don't have a comprehensive theoretical framework that can provide or generate testable hypotheses about subtitles reading behavior. For example, if we have this kind of multitasking activity when you watch videos with subtitles. So if you want to you want to look at the influence of audio on the process of subtitle, what kind of hypothesis you make? Whether, and in terms of the language, like I have L1, first language, second language, audio, and how that may influence the process of subtitles differently. You need to have, you based on your own experience, you may have some intuition, but we need some theoretical framework that can provide you with testable hypotheses with a solid theoretical grounding. And then your findings will help refine this theoretical framework as well. So at that time, we don't have that. That is one, because of this gap is also one of my motivation during my PhD to sort of consolidate different relevant theories and then trying to put them together and provide a theoretical framework that can hopefully provide account for multimodal language processing, which I will explain in detail later. Okay, so moving to now finally contemporary events. So in this stage, in this phase, we have seen a growing interest in knowing the reading process when people watch subtitle videos. But to understand reading, we have to first get understanding of the core stages of reading. So first you have to recognize the word from the visual symbols and retrieve the meaning for what that is word identification. And then you have to combine the meaning of these words to construct larger units of meaning corresponding to phrase, sentence, and discourse. And ultimately, you build a situation model that describes your experience when you watch this task for task comprehension. So all this process relied on the coordination of different cognitive systems for visual perception, because you have to take in the visual symbol, visual perception, and your language processing. You need to retrieve the meaning based on the word meaning, and of course memory, which is used to store your the word, the lexical knowledge, etc., and attention, and as well as the eye movement control. So even such like a task that seems so simple and easy for you in daily life, it involves a lot of complicated common systems and content process. And just to unpack it a little bit more, so I just take word identification, for example. Yeah, that's my cat. So let's see, if you see a stream of visual symbols on task, I just want to use this example to illustrate how complicated just one simple task word identification can be, even though you may think this is such a simple task in your life. So when you see a string of visual symbols, first you have to be able to put CAT, these three letters together and identify. You know these three letters should be a word, right? So you combine them together. So that is taking the visual features from the visual input, and then you develop the orthographical representation. That is the shape of the word form. And then you retrieve the pronunciation, the sound or the pronunciation of each letter per cat. And then, oh, we have cat here. And then you retrieve the meaning, and then retrieve the sound. And then based on that logical representation, we retrieve the meaning of the word cat from your memory. That is the semantic, where you build the semantic representation. And after that, an image of cat may appear in your mind. And that is the conceptual representation. So you see, even for a simple task like a word identification, it have to go through actually different stages. And all this happens very rapidly. And what makes reading actually challenging is not just the number of the complexities involved in different tasks, different stages involved in reading, but also the fact that all these stages of reading or the process, they are subject to visual and attentional constraints. So the first is the visual constraint in reading. As you can see from here, this is your fixation. We all know that visual processing is most effective in the fovea. So fovea is the size, roughly if you hold your hand straight, it's basically the size of your palms. And that is the area for extend 2 degrees around the fixation. That is the area where you can process those visual information most effectively, because it has the highest visual acuity. And then the visual acuity will drop rapidly from fovea to parafoveal and then peripheral regions. So that's why when during reading, you have to move your eyes rapidly so that you can align your fovea region to the information that you want to process effectively. So actually, when you're reading, your eyes are actually moving very quickly, rapidly. And with that visual constraint in mind, you may kind of start to understand why actually it could be really cognitive demanding when you watch subtitle video, because first you will have the visual resources like at the background. At the same time, you have the task. So that will involve the split of attention, right? So keep that question in mind, and then because that is what we explored in some of our research. And then not just the visual constraint, we also have attentional constraints. So we all know which attention. So what they mean by attention is if you need to further process information, you have to select or repress certain information. Like I want to process that information, you have to deploy your attention to select that information for further processing. And attentional control also allow you to suppress irrelevant information. Like when you are reading and you have all those advertisements pop up on the website, you will have this kind of attentional deployment of attentional control to suppress this irrelevant information based on your task goal. But we know, but attentional resources are limited, and that is demonstrated by the fact that there is only a limited area from which useful information can be obtained from a single fixation. So that's what we call perceptual span. So when in reading English, so alphabetic letters, so it's a symmetry to the right, 14 to 15 characters from left when you the reading direction is from left to right. So the perceptual span is a symmetry to the right, extending 14 to 15 characters, whereas to the left is 1 to 3, 3 to 4 characters. So this asymmetry of perceptual span actually provide the evidence for the fact that attentional resources is limited in reading. And to understand the we talk about reading process. The core stages involved in reading process. So the first most important one is word identification, and then you combine the meaning into the sentence context. That is what is involved in post-lexical processing, right? So the question you will ask is, so how can we know whether and how they engage in the identification of words? So for example, when people pay attention from the eye movement data, you can see, okay, they're looking at that word. But how can you tell whether they are reading that, whether they are retrieving meaning from their memory, identifying that word, and then whether they are combining the meanings of that word into a sentence context? How can you tell? So that's why we draw on the markers of lexical and post-lexical processing. So these are established effects in reading research. So a lot of I will probably save that for in the remaining of the seminar. So about the benefits of transdisciplinary research, because a lot of this kind of insights actually builds on or draws on the research, substantial research in reading research. So for example, the word length effect, what it means is longer words tend to have more and longer fixation compared to short words. So this is a marker of early lexical processing. And it's easy to understand, right? Because if the word is longer, it will take you more time to combine these symbols into a word form. And then word frequency effect means that high frequency words, so the words that occurs more frequently in your life, you use more frequently, will have fewer and shorter fixation compared to low frequency words. Does it make sense? Because if you use it frequently, you can retrieve the memories, retrieve the meanings from your memory quickly. So that is a marker of lexical processing. And also we found the wrap up. We have the wrap up effect, which refers to the fact that fixation at the end of when the word length and word frequency, with the word length and word frequency being equal, it found that fixation at the end of the clause and sentence tend to be longer compared to other locations. Does it make sense to you why? Because when you start to reach the end of the sentence, you start to wrap up, convert the linguistic content into a propositional content, into what you call idea units, right? So you that's why it called wrapping up everything at the end of the sentence. So that would tend to lead to longer fixation. But this is also a little, it's well established, but we also need to be cautious when using this wrap-up effect, because if the word frequency and word length are not well controlled, not being equal, then there could be some confounding factors in that. And also it could also associated with some high-level factors like the punctuation markers, the influence of the punctuation marker, because at the end of the sentence, normally there will be a punctuation there. So it could be the punctuation marker that can play a role, not just the linguistic processing that play the role. Okay, so some specific eye-checking evidence that we have found on different topics. So the first study we done is because on subtitle speed, because this is a very crucial component in a lot of guidelines, and also because of the fact that subtitle speed, the guidelines on subtitle speed vary from company to company and from country to country. Although the recommended is 20, but some company will say, yeah, you can go to 20. So the reason for this kind of variety in subtitle speed, I think partly also because of the fact that we don't have much empirical evidence informing the optimal subtitle speed, or informing informing us about the consequence of having fast subtitle speed. So when the subtitle speed become really fast, what is the consequence on the processing and the comprehension? So if we have empirical evidence on that, it will be easier to convey or the message to media companies not to have fast subtitles, like you can't go over a certain speed, for example. So in this experiment, we manipulated two factors. One is subtitle speed. We manipulated it into three conditions: 12 character, 20, and 28 character per second. 28 is really fast. The reason why we have 20 is still the speed that acceptable by some media companies, but 20 is really fast. But however, you may see subtitles at this speed in some movies and films occasionally. But the reason we want to include that is we really want to push the boundary to see like what is the consequence of reaching that fast speed. And we also manipulate the presence and absence of the background video. So as you can see from here, one condition is they have no background support, visual support from the background image, whereas another one, they will have the background image or video. And we have English native speakers watching English subtitles, and we want to exclude the confounding factors of sound. So they are not provided with sound, so they have to rely on reading the subtitles for comprehension, and we only measure the comprehension of the subtitles. And first, we have the global analysis. So global analysis means they will analyze the eye movement data on the whole subtitle regions. So basically, we draw an interest area on the whole subtitle, and to look at the global eye movement matter when processing the subtitles. And we also have the interest area for the whole video background. And the global analysis, we have four measures. One is mean fixation duration, so the average fixation, the average of time of each fixation, and the saccade length, so the mean saccade length, so the average length of saccades, and the total number of fixations and number of crossovers. So crossovers means, for example, if you can see here, fixation 10 and fixation 11. So this means the viewer is moving his eye from the subtitle back to the video, right? And from fixation 2 to 3, he's moving his eye from the video to the subtitle. So number of crossover is the number of the times that he moved his eyes between these two different regions. And we also have local analysis, that is the analysis of eye movements on individual words. So you can see here, we employed with this support from SR research team who provides the eye tracker. I mean, we purchased the iLink eye tracker from them, and with their great support, we're able to develop and innovative paradigms that allow us to draw this interest area for individual words automatically. So we don't need to draw this. In other words, we will have the eye movement data on each word after data collection, and which make it possible to conduct this local analysis. So for local analysis, we look at gaze duration, that is the total amount of time spent on each word before the eye moving out of the word in any direction. So this reflects early lexical processing. And we also look at the total reading time. So that is the total amount of time you spend on the word, including, for example, refixation. So that will also reflect, that will include the post lexical processing, because sometimes you may not understand that word that well, and you have comprehension difficulty, so you have to go back to that word and revisit. That will be counted in the total reading times. And we also look at the percentage of words being skipped. So some major results in terms of comprehension, we find that comprehension improves when the video is presented, the background video is presented. But you may wonder, like, although it's intuitively speaking, it makes sense, because from our daily life, having a background video, right, it will help you to better understand the subtitles. But we talk about also, we know what we have learned from the visual acuity and attentional constraints. Then you may wonder how that happened. If you have to split your attention between two different sources, and then you're actually able to achieve better comprehension compared to with the presence of video compared to the absence of video, right? So that's why it's beneficial to have, it's worthwhile to develop a theoretical framework that can guide your understanding of the phenomena. And with the finding, you can also refine the theoretical framework, and that contribute to our better understanding. And in terms of this inference of subtitle speed, we found it's not that surprising, because we all know, like, when subtitle speed increase from 20 to 28, comprehension will drop. But we provide the empirical evidence on exactly how comprehension performance will change at different specific speeds. And in terms of the global analysis, I'm not sure whether you can see it clearly. So the top left one, this is the average fixation duration. And the figure B, the top right is the average saccade length. And the top bottom is total number of fixations. And the bottom right is the number of crossovers. So in summary, what we found is when subtitle speed increase, participants tend to have shorter, fewer fixations, and longer saccades on the whole subtitles. So, that may echo your experience, right? When the subtitle speeds, you may tend to do this kind of test skimming task. And even like when you are doing examination, when you are under time pressure, you will start to do those test skimming, right? So that is what we observe with fast subtitle in terms of global. But actually, in terms of local, how fast subtitles influence the processing of each word, the word identification, lexical and post-lexical processing. What we find is for total reading times, the word frequency effect and word length effect decrease as subtitle speed increase. What does that mean? We know that word frequency effect and word length effect are markers of lexical processing, right? So when subtitle speed increase, they spend less time on individual words, and that compromise their lexical processing. So the lexical processing become more superficial. And also the words at the end of the subtitle will skip more often when the subtitle speed increase, which indicates they may not be able to reach to the end of the subtitle. Right. And after exploring the inference of subtitle speed, we move to using the same paradigm, like allow us to collect the eye movement data on individual words automatically. We look at the inference, how audio, the presence and language of audios may influence the processing of subtitles. So it's also a 3x2 design within subject design, but we manipulate the audio condition. The first is they will watch subtitles in English, so there will be their L2 subtitles, and they will have audio in their L1 Chinese audio, in their L2 English audio, and no audio. And again, we manipulate the video presence because we also want to confirm whether what we found in the subtitle speed experiment will be found in the audio experiment. So we also manipulate the video presence. Okay. In terms of comprehension, again, similar to what we found in the subtitle speed experiment, comprehension was better when the video is present. So sort of this finding is kind of robust. At least it's tested, confirms in 2 different experiments, and also it has been tested, in other research using text and picture as stimuli. But there's no main effect of audio conditions. So their comprehension remained similar across different audio conditions. In terms of the global analysis, we draw on similar set of eye movement measures, but as you can see, you can actually predict what will be your hypothesis. Like when you have L1 audio, L2 audio, and no audio. So the availability or the language audio ultimately actually, they influence your need for subtitles or your reading propensity. How much you need, the need for reading. So when you have L1 audio, you can get the content very easily from L1, from Chinese audio. So you don't need to read the subtitles that much, but when there's no audio at all, then you will have the highest need. So the reading propensity is the highest when there's no audio, because you can only rely on subtitles for comprehension. So in other words, we find that when the reading need decrease from no audio to English audio or Chinese audio, participants tend to have longer saccades, shorter, fewer fixations, and more subtitles skip. So this whole pattern is very similar. Actually, it's the same as what we found in the subtitle speed experiment. They both tend to show the task skimming pattern, but the same pattern, the similar pattern, do you think they have the same reason behind that? They are very different. They have very different reasons. For the subtitle speed, it's more from the global task demand, something that you can't control. And then you adapt your eye movement behaviors to cope with this kind of increase in global task demand, right? So you develop this task scheming pattern or strategy. But in this case, it's more like it's under their control. It's their voluntary choice. They know they can choose whether to listen to the audio or not, right? But they choose, actually, that reflects their voluntary choice. They monitor the trade-off of different resources and adapt their eye movement behaviors to attain an optimal level of comprehension. So that reflects the important role played by metacognition, so-called the cognition of cognition. So you're monitoring what is happening, and you are able to adapt your behavior to achieve the optimal goals. So even the same similar pattern are observed, there are very different reasons behind that and motivations. And for local analysis, what we found is, although we didn't find the interaction between audio condition and word frequency and word length effects, and although they spent less time on the words, but the lexical processing was not compromised or attenuated with L1 or L2 audio. So they spend less time, but it's not compromised. They are still very sensitive, still equally sensitive to these lexical variables like word frequency and word length. But interestingly, the wrap-up effect, you can see here. So this the black line represent the top one is gauge duration and the bottom one is total reading times. So you can see the black lines represent the gauge duration on the ending words. This is for video absent, this is for video present. And this is the gray line represent the gauge duration for the middle words. So you can see, remember what we say about the wrap-up effect. So fixation at the end of the sentence or clause tend to be longer than other locations like middle, right? So what you can see here is Chinese audio, English audio, and no audio. So you can see a very clear pattern here for English audio. There's a more pronounced wrap-up effect. You see the gap here is much larger compared to Chinese and no audio condition, right? So that shows a more profound wrap-up effect with English audio compared to Chinese and no Chinese audio and no audio. What does that suggest? Remember what is the use of, a wrap-up effect? It tells us something about post-lexical processing, right? So that a more profound wrap-up effect indicates deeper post-lexical processing with English L2 audio. But the question is why that happened? Why, when you can think about that with your own experience with L2 audio. Remember, they are watching L2 subtitle. So with L2 subtitles and L2 audio, actually you engage in deeper post-lexical processing compared to L1 audio and no audio. Yeah. So when you have L1 audio, maybe you don't need to combine. You can get those content so easily from the L1 content, from the L1 audio. You don't need to spend that much effort combining the meanings of the words from the L2 subtitles. So it's not that necessary. And then in the no audio condition, it becomes very difficult to do that because without auditory support, combining the meanings of the L2 words into a sentence could be more challenging. So with the L2 support, actually it can facilitate this whole process and make you engage in a deeper post-lexical processing because you have the support with the L2 audio when you're reading the L2 subtitles. And this support will help you engage in a deeper process of combining the meanings of words in the subtitle into a sentence context. So this may be a little bit overwhelming. It's too much to cover in a seminar, but I'm just trying to give a glimpse into the value of having this kind of analysis, local analysis, and how much insights that it can provide compared to global analysis alone. Okay, so if you're interested, you can explore it in your own spare time. Yeah. So what we have found, there definitely I can see that more research are emerging. Like from time to time, I will receive notification from ResearchGate about publication of new eye-checking research on subtitle processing. So I know this is a field that is definitely has growing momentum. And what I'm sharing here doesn't capture the whole picture, but just what I have found. To the best of my knowledge is we found that eye movements when they're doing multimodal reading as involved in the reading of subtitles, we found that eye movement control are also locally controlled by the cognitive process. So they are driven by high-level factors associated with lexical and post-lexical processing. So this is in line with what is found in the reading of static tests. So static tests is even they have very, in terms of the format and a lot of different features, they are very different, right? When you're reading static tests, you read at your own pace. You don't have multimodal resources. But there are some similarities between these two reading behavior. And what we also found is the perceptual, cognitive, and motor system that support reading in multimodal situations. They are flexible and responsive to task demand, as you can see in the subtitle speed experiment. When the speed increase, they can make adaptation to the eye movement behaviors by having the task skimming pattern, right? But we also need to realize that this kind of adaptation are not always driven by global task demand. They can be driven by their own decision, their own voluntary choice. So they have the ability, viewers, humans, I think the remarkable ability of human beings, they can monitor what they are doing, having this kind of metacognition, monitoring what is going on, and the trade-off of different multiple resources, and then adapt their processing behavior to different sources. So, but I realized metacognition, even in reading research, is not that well explored. And not to mention, in subtitle reading, but I feel that is an area that is worth more, that should have more research, have more scholar attention. Okay, so with all these empirical findings, we've developed a preliminary multimodal. It's not that the comprehensive one, we are still developing it, but with the findings that we have obtained, we have gained from previous research, we're able to develop this multimodal integrated language framework. So the aim is really to provide a theoretical account of how multiple resources like text, as you can see here, they have the text, they have the images, they have the audio, how these multiple sources of information, they are integrated and interacted with each other, and then contribute to the ultimate situation model that is essential for comprehension. So this framework illustrates the coordination of different systems essential for language processing, including, you can see the visual system, the auditory system, or you can see the perceptual system, the language, and the memory system. And specifically, we include different types of memory systems drawing on previous research. For example, the declarative memory is mainly the memory that you stored your lexical knowledge. So that's where the word identification process will mainly happen. or relied on. And the procedural memory is the memory system that you stored, we call the rule-governed knowledge. So like the grammar, how you combine different things together based on specific rules. So this rule governed knowledge are stored in the procedural memory, and that's why we hypothesize persistent sentence processing, which requires you combine the words using the grammar, will happen within the procedural memory. And the working memory you're all familiar with is having the limited capacity for holding certain amount of information with a short period of time. And another one core assumption, just to so you know that this framework actually builds on the reading model of eye movement, two models here. It builds on the eye movement model control during reading. That is the Easy Reader developed by my supervisor, Eric Reichel, and also a more recent model of reading, Uber Reader, developed by him in 2021. So this framework is consistent with the basic principles in previous cognitive theories, and we also adopt the core assumptions from the Easy Reader model and Uber Reader model, that is the serial processing. The serial processing means that only one representation can be processed in one time. So you can only process it in a one by one manner. For example, if you need to identify a word and you need to identify an object, so each word has to be identified one by one, and each object has to be identified one by one. So that is serial processing. So let's say if you have a new object to identify at the background and you have a new word to read in the subtitle, then you can only do one. You can either identify the object or you can identify the word in the subtitle. But that will pose the question about the unknown. Remember that question I asked you before, then what we found is viewers can have better comprehension when the background video was present. And how that happen, how that benefits happen if they have to, if they can only do it like in a serial manner, right? They have to split their attention constantly, which will disrupt their reading. So we propose that there is another type of processing that's called parallel processing, indicated by the gray box here. So parallel processing means you can process multiple representations at the same time. So that will make it possible to explain how the benefits of having both background video and subtitles, having background video can support the reading of subtitles. Because after you identify the visual object, let's say there's a polar bear at the background, you already identified the polar bear, then you can move your eyes to read the subtitles. But at the same time, you can use your peripheral vision to keep tracking the movement of the polar bear. So you don't need to move your eyes there, but you can still keep, after you identify it's a polar bear, you can just keep tracking the movement, the location of this kind of objects. And then this tracking will actually facilitate to some extent co-referencing the text in the subtitle. Because you know that's a polar bear, and in the subtitle you will see a subtitle that reads like "in her own maybe baby," her own baby, and you know what her means. The word "her" refers to the polar bear that you just identified. So this co-referencing will provide the benefits that you have seen, like in our previous finding, why having the background video can lead to better comprehension. So the core assumption, that what makes our framework different from previous framework is the inclusion of both parallel processing and serial processing that enable us to explain the findings that we observe. And our framework is also aligned with, consistent with some series, renowned series in content psychology, media learning, scene perception, and reading research. Because as I mentioned, language processing in subtitle video is really multitasking. So you can't just simply draw on series from only one task, right? So you put together everything, and we are still developing this one. There's still a lot that remain to explore, but I think it provides a foundation for further research. And just quickly about how we move forward. And now there's growing research, some emerging research that start to look at how individual difference can play a role in shaping the content processing and reading of subtitles. So there's one recent study we conducted in 2025, led by Kruger, Professor Yang Kruger. So we compared the audience groups amidst how hearing viewers and deaf viewers may read subtitles differently, and we also manipulate subtitle condition, additive versus verbatim. So verbatim subtitles we have fast subtitle speed, as you can see from the screenshot here. So this is the verbatim subtitle, has a character per second of 29, whereas the added one is 15. So here you can clearly see how the increase in task volume can compromise the processing of the video the background video. You can see the heat map. So when the subtitle speed increase, they have to reduce their visual attention at the background, right? So this kind of provide the supported evidence of our assumption about the serial processing. You have to move your eyes to identify new objects or to identify new words. I think because of time, I think we just skip this part because you will get it when we publish it. But the key finding is we indeed find that, again, fast subtitle or verbatim subtitle will compromise the processing of background visuals and will lead to more superficial subtitles. And this impact is more profound for deaf viewers. And another recent study conducted by Lupukina, they look at children, because most of the research conducted on eye tracking research, using eye tracking to understand subtitle processing, mostly focused on skilled readers, adult readers. So children readers are kind of remained underexplored. So their study provides some really interesting finding. They just compare two conditions, with and without subtitle, but they look at participants, children from year 1 and year 6 to year 6. And what they found is more proficient reading. So their attention to the subtitle was actually associated with their reading proficiency. And that is very interesting because remember, in the very early and foundational research, the key message is subtitle reading was automatic. But it's not necessarily the case, right? So it's associated with your reading proficiency. So if you if you haven't developed the basic literacy skills, you are not able to engage in the reading of the subtitles. And then when they develop this literacy skill, when they pay attention to subtitles, they're actually reading it. They're not just paying attention, because the word frequency effect was observed in their eye movement data. So they are not just paying attention to this, looking at it. When they look at the subtitle, they're actually reading it. So I think this provide a more solid evidence for to revisit, the so-called automatic reading behavior. Okay, to sum up, to conclude, I hope through this seminar is very intensive, I feel. But what I'm trying to say is, convey is translation is really an interaction with the language, and both spoken and written. And language is the backbone of human civilization. But the use language translation is about the language, dealing with language, but we have to realize that the use of language has been evolving with technical advancements. So it's no longer monolingual, but it's moving to more dynamic multimodal context. So with this kind of evolution, we have to come up with new techniques to bring vitality to translation research and translation studies. So it's definitely worthwhile to foster more vibrant interdisciplinary collaborations across disciplines, and to develop more robust theoretical frameworks and innovative technologies. And I definitely benefit a lot from this kind of interdisciplinary collaboration. So there's definitely more to explore in the future. And eye tracking has proven to be a very useful and valuable tool in helping us to understand the cognitive process underlying subtitle processing, but it has its own limitation, and we do need more advanced techniques like brain imaging to really to get more insights into their mental process. Finally, I want to say all our findings, we will be asked the so what question. Okay, you'll know this, you use eye tracking to understand something, and so what, how does it relate to or contribute to our practical, the translation practice? So the final point I want to make is these findings are really useful, valuable in the fact that they provide a scientific basis for audiovisual translation strategy. Translators need to have a better understanding of the cognitive process, how people process this audiovisual content. Because imagine you spend a lot of time choosing a perfect word, but because of the temporal and spatial constraint, this word may be totally just skipped, not able to be read by the viewers. And also considering the compressed interplay between the background video and the subtitle, that will also have an influence on the choice of the word. When it's already redundant, the information is already conveyed by the background image, do you need to reconsider the word, because one word can have different translations? So this specific choice, you have to consider the role played by the visual support at the background. To optimize, we have to optimize the cognitive processing for the viewers as well. Okay. So I think these are some selective reference, and thank you for listening. Yeah, all questions are welcome, and yeah, we are kind of together with other scholars, establishing a connection in audiovisual translation lab, in short CAT lab. So hopefully we will have more interesting research in the future. And if you're interested in what we are doing, and feel free to get in touch and draw a line.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So wonderful, wonderful presentation, Professor Liao. There was a lot of content. You went into a lot of detail, and I'm sure that the public here or online might have a lot of questions. So we have officially entered the Q&A stage. So if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands. And also for those online, you might share your questions through the chat. Any questions? Yes.
Well, thank you, Professor, for your brilliant sharing. My question is somehow related to the cognition mechanism that lies within the audience or the subtitle readers. So somehow we generally recognize that there is a so-called alignment of multimodal information within our brain. So for example, if we are hearing a sound, says blue, so we automatically choose the color that represents blue. So based on the sound, in order to align with the things that comes into our mind. But there is a very specific occasion for like a foreign language learners or foreign language video audience. So, for example, for many Chinese audience, they have already get accustomed to a situation to listen to the foreign language audio input while looking directly at their L1, that is their native language. So in this case, it somehow creates a very obscure, very eccentric phenomenon that their the inconsistency between the different models that come into your mind has struck a very subtle balance in their mind in order, like, how to say, that's kind of break the what we call alignment. So has there any existing studies that are looking into this kind of disalignment and find out the reasons of it, or if there are still some research gap of it?
Thank you for the question. That is a very interesting one, and I think you're kind of talking about alignment or congruency. So like what you hear is the same as what you see in the task, so they're congruent. And this congruency is not just between verbal resources like the spoken language and the written language, but it also happens between the verbal resources and non-verbal resources like the background video. So we haven't conducted research on the congruency between. I mean, we have like remember the L2 subtitle, and they will have L2 subtitle and then L1 audio and then L2 subtitle. So this kind of may also maybe is what you're talking about, the misalignment or incongruency. But when we talk about incongruency, we also need to, I think we need to be a little bit more cautious about on what level is incongruence, because they are incongruent in meaning, but maybe they use different languages, but the meaning is like L2 and L1. The L1 audio and then the L2 subtitle, like saying the cat, what you see from the cat, right? You see CAT cat in the L2 subtitle, and you hear Mao in L1 audio. So the meaning actually is congruent. And this congruency will actually I will hypothesize, may facilitate in terms of the meaning congruency, may facilitate when you hear Mao, actually, you may already establish an image of the cat in your mind, and then you may not need to spend that much time in reading the L2 subtitle cat. And that's why we observe like with L1 audio, they will spend less time reading the subtitle, although the comprehension did not improve, but it did not decrease. But there are some studies looking at disruptive. The reason why we look at the influence of audio is actually there are some studies in reading research. They found that the background sounds has a disruption effect on the reading of text. So they found that, for example, when you are reading a text, you have background music, and they make more like a nuanced manipulation with the sound pattern, like whether you can recognize the sound, or whether it's recognizable or not recognizable, etc. And they found that it would disrupt your reading behavior. So this is understandable because it doesn't provide the meaning to provide any support to help you retrieve the meaning of the text. But your attention will be drawn to this kind of irrelevant information. And because limited attention resources are limited, so it makes sense why your reading behavior is disrupted. But we didn't find, that's what we have mentioned in our paper, that what we found is different from the findings in terms of the disruption effect of background audio, because we found that it did not improve comprehension, but it did not disrupt it. And one of the reasons could be, I hypothesized the congruency in meaning. But that is the concludency. I mean, in terms of the verbal resources, we have, as I mentioned, we have conducted one study that look at how the congruency between the subtitle and the background video may influence the process of subtitles. So the preliminary finding we found is if the task is irrelevant to the subtitles, it doesn't provide any support to to the, for example, word identification, etc. Actually, it will cause the split of attention, and actually it will disrupt the reading. But if it's congruent with the subtitle, yeah, then it will. The emergent evidence seems to provide supporting evidence for that, but we are still like finalizing that bit. Yeah.
It takes process.
Yeah, it's very complicated, and that's why I forgot to mention, like, that's why I need to acknowledge the contribution from collaborators, because I don't think I would be able to. Of course, it relied on individual hardware, but this kind of compressed process, it really required the wisdom from a dedicated research community, research group. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any more questions in the room? If not, we have some questions online, so I'm going to read them as they come. So we have one from Guo Taiting, which says, thank you for sharing, Professor Liao. I learned a lot. Out of curiosity, I wonder if there are discrepancies in your data set regarding how people shift between different interest zones. If there are, what do those discrepancies mean?
Could you please clarify that discrepancy in my data set regarding which data set and?
Yes. Guo Taiting, would you mind clarifying your question? We're going to move to the next
and which data set do you refer to? And I'm not sure whether you're talking about, because you mentioned the shift between different zones, so you mean the shift between subtitle and background video? If that is the case, we indeed have the IMU measure of number of crossover. So yeah.
Okay, we have another question from Abdel Fattah Adel, saying, does this multimodal framework account for genre variations, aesthetic content versus informative content?
I may need a little bit more explanation on that.
Which multimodal framework, right?
Yeah, the framework. So does it account for genre variation, aesthetic content, informative content? Could you be more specific about that? I mean, because that model is really, I mean, it's not it's really about accounting for how different sorts of information are integrated and interacted with each other. For example, the auditory input, like we put it into two, like verbal and non-verbal, and they can interact with, for example, word identification process, etc. So we are more like it's more about accounting for the interaction between different systems. And based on that, we can generate some testable hypotheses about how the reading behaviors may change in different conditions. But if you have aesthetic content and informative content, then which system do you present this content? And I may need more information.
A clarification from Abdel Fattah Adel. Watching a movie or a documentary film. I don't know.
So that is a follow-up.
Yeah.
What also does it like whether it can account for language processing in movie and documentary versus documentary? I think the genre itself is not really the ultimate goal, because when we really need to the ultimate difference between movie and even within movie is already one genre is already complicated enough. Like you will have different movie the background visual complexity could be different. The level of visual complexity could be different. So if you're saying comparing movie and documentary, if you're saying how the visual, one distinction that came to my mind is the visual complexity. So we use most of my PhD research actually use documentary as the stimuli, and they have very simple visual. The visual complexity is relatively low. And then when we move to a recent study, we use movie, a TV series, and we observe some difference actually because in their eye movement behavior, because the visual complexity increase and the task demand in scene perception also increase. So I think ultimately we need to, when we comparing movie and documentary, we sort of more want to know about how the level of visual complexity may play a role in the interaction and coordination of different information sources. I'm not sure whether I answered that question because as I mentioned, like this framework is still in the developing stage, is not comprehensive enough. So yeah, we are still working on that.
We have another question from Ilya Popov. Dear Professor Liao, do you consider watching subtitles listening at the same time a good practice for becoming a simultaneous interpreter? I used to listen to electrical dance music and fulfilling grammar tasks and translating written at the same time. Thank you.
I'm not sure I'm in a good position to answer this question. Do you? Because you coordinate some class on interpreting.
Yeah, I teach translation technology, so I don't know that much about interpreting, but do whatever you want, right? Whatever you enjoy, right? If it helps you, why not?
But I want to ask something like this is a good question in because that's why we are doing empirical research on collecting data about, that tell us about whether it work or not. So we can tell, like I'm not using interpreter as the subject, but we do working on some projects that look at whether watching subtitles and having the audio at the same time can improve their reading skills, like, and can facilitate their word recognition, and then help with the vocabulary development. And I believe word recognition and vocabulary development are not just fundamental skills for reading, but are also essential skills for interpreting. So my intuition will be, yeah, it will be helpful, but we need evidence. Yeah.
Okay, next question from Wang Rongyu. A relevant. Oh, this is sharing one paper, one study. That's not what they said. The impact of incongruities between the dialogue and intralingual subtitles on viewer experience.
Yeah. That's a new one. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah. That is they look at the incongruency between the audio and by that is different in the fact that I think their incongruency is in the meaning. Is it in the meaning? I need to double check. Yeah, but that is relevant. Yeah.
Another question. Do you think that AI will affect subtitling in the near future?
Oh, of course. Of course. And then that's why I think we need to incorporate AI into our subtitling workflow and also explore the potential of AI in developing certain subtitling systems that may help with, for example, reading development or even interpreting tasks, because it's not yes or no. It's not that simple. There are a lot of factors that can play a role there. So that's why I want to maybe highlight here is don't expect a final answer on one question, because there are a lot of multiple layers of complexity underneath. For example, if you ask whether subtitles can help with work reading or not, it also depends on the group, just like whether people read subtitles automatically or not. You see, early research, they have the key message, yeah, it's automatic reading, because they only have skilled readers, adult readers. They already developed the basic literacy skills. But more recent findings, they shows that for year 1 children, they don't have the basic literary skills to engage with the subtitles. So the reading process is not that so-called automatic at that time. So I think it's no final, no one fix all solution, but AI would definitely change, everything.
Thank you, Musab, for your question. And we also have another question from Joanna Charlotte. Do you also look at alternative positioning of STs on a frame or screen in your research? As a subtitler, I try to limit the number of characters per line so as to limit the time and concentration required to read a ST. Would have split your example in March ... into 2 lines. There is scope in your work to influence an improvement in ST work. Limit. Typo. Sorry.
So it's so it's about, my understanding is about the influence of positioning, right? So unfortunately, I haven't looked at that yet. Because there are definitely a lot of factors that can play a role, but because, as I mentioned, cognitive resources, time resources are all limited, especially in our case. So we will basically start with factors, key features, factors that we believe will have the more significant and profound impact, like a subtitle speed. And also, but positioning will also, is also important one, and definitely I think they should attract more scholar interest, but I haven't myself looked at that yet.
Okay, I think we have one question here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I just have a burning questions related to the number of characters in a line. So I'm just wondering to know if there is the semantic densities maybe affect the lines, the characters in the study setting, experiment setting. For example, I'm very curious about why you set a line as in 12 and 20 or 29 characters per line.
Not per line. We manipulate.
CCPS, yes.
Yes. For a second.
So does it will consider about the semantic density, or just put the counted characters in a second?
You mean across different speed conditions? The content is the same.
Oh yeah.
But we just we manipulate the speed by reduce the duration of time, the duration of the subtitle. So the subtitle is exactly the same across different speed conditions, but for the fast speeds, we just reduce make them stay on the screen for a shorter period of time. So the semantic density will be the same. So that's why that will allow us to be more confident in our finding, because imagine if we did not manipulate it in this way, then if you ask me this question, I would say, well, that could be the reason.
Yeah.
And so in empirical research, we sometimes will be asked like ecological validity, and but it's difficult. Like if there's no perfect choice, so we try to have a balance. You can't exclude everything, but you can't include everything. If you try to create a real scenario, then you include everything, then ultimately you're finding you can't tell which one is playing the key role.
Yes.
Yeah. So it depends on the research question. If your research question is on subtitle speed, then we exclude. That's why we exclude the audio. Yeah, we only just want to, and then gradually later we will include the audio for different research question if our research question is on the influence of the audio, right?
Thank you so much.
Yes, we have more questions over here. Thank you.
All the way from CUH.
Hi, Professor Liao. So thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I have a question about the impact of the studies. So how do you collaborate with industry stakeholders, and how do you distribute the results? And if there's are there any seeable, visible results? Now That means, are they making any real changes depending on your research? So
That is a really high level.
Tricky.
Yeah, I mean, if I can go back to you, if you record from the second slide, like when I mentioned all the collaborator, you got that is the planner read. So that is I think the first time we collaborate with industry partners. Although in Australia we also collaborate with language service partners like NATI, also NATI, all graduates, etc. And for subtitle research, we start partnering with PlanetRead, which is a not-for-profit organization that it has been established for many years, and it itself already has global impact. So we are more like putting resources together, because what we have is we have the so more like a solid training in empirical research. We have the eye tracking skill, data analysis skill, and what they have is other resources. They have technical resources in creating the stimuli. They have the advantages in collecting large data sets, and they have the population that is suitable, really suitable for being the subject. Like in India, there's a large population of children that who do not have a basic who do not have proper access to education, and therefore do not have enough literacy skills. So we putting this together. How we come to the collaboration is my supervisor Yang Kruger has initial connection with Professor Butch Kavsari, and then I think in 2023, I think I visited India, so I visited them. So I visit their lab, and then we share the ideas of how we may be able to collaborate, and then one lead to another. So in terms of the impact, we have finished some preliminary analysis, but we haven't published it yet. And I think they are doing a great job in pursuing the policymakers, making changes to include subtitles in videos. But again, we need more evidence, because we are still we're still finishing preliminary data analysis, but we're still in the process of collecting longitudinal data, and we need more robust empirical evidence for before we send our message to the public and go and talk to the educators. But that is indeed one of our aims. Yeah, with translate the findings, empirical findings, into real world impact. So all these are relevant to our practice, real life practice. Like it can help you better help translators better understand how you make your translation strategies as choices, and how this translation strategies may have an influence on their viewer experience, their content processing. And policymakers, they need to have evidence-informed or evidence-based guidelines. For example, subtitle speed is one example. We clearly show like you can't have subtitle speed at 28. That clearly compromises their comprehension. But we make that message, and then it's their decision to adopt or not. But there are different like definitely more scope to explore. We still like exploring. Yeah.
Okay, and I think that brings the seminar to a close very beautifully. So thank you very much to all of you for attending. A round of applause.
On time.
And thank you for all of those that attended online. Thank you very much. That's all from us. Take care.